So I will speak of the use of dynamical zeta functions to problems which are encountered actually in number theory. The conjecture of Flemmer. So I will define what it is. The conjecture of Schinzel-Zassenhaus, and other limit problems in number theory. So the first course is devoted to give a certain panorama of what is a Mahler measure, of a certain number of theorems which are obtained by many people. Lemmer, so the conjecture of Lemmer goes back to the 30s. So the paper of Lemmer was published in 1933. André Schinzel, David Boyd, Chris Smith, Arturas Dubiskas, in France, Marie-Josée Bertin, in Paris, Georges Rhin. Some people working in arithmetic geometry with the theory of heights, and so it's a very rich domain. And my topic is concerned with the use of dynamical zeta functions of the beta shifts. So it includes arithmetical dynamical systems attached to algebraic integers, actually. And we can define analytic tools with a variable basis of numeration in order to study these problems. So what are these problems? I will come back to that. I have not yet defined, I have not yet mentioned the conjecture of Flemmer. I will come back to that. I have to introduce first the Mahler measure of a polynomial. So if you have, to say things simply, if you want to study solutions of Diophantine equations, so it's natural to try to associate to such solutions a size. That the size of a solution is the size of a rational point in arithmetic geometry, or that's called also a complexity, or that's called a measure. And any computation on partial take advantages of some finiteness properties when this size lies below some bound. That's a very large view of the problem. And the first step of that consists in attributing a real value to an algebraic number and to solve the problem of finding such a size for algebraic numbers in particular. So an algebraic number alpha, it's a complex number, and it is described uniquely by its minimal polynomial, which is an integer polynomial. And so we say the dominant coefficient is by convention positive, you know that. So there are several sizes on the minimal polynomials, which can be used to give a notion of size of the algebraic number. So what kind of possibilities do we have? Several notions of heights. So you take a non-zero polynomial like that. There is a Mahler measure. So the conjecture of Flemmer is concerned with the minoration of the Mahler measure. So you have it there written. So that the absolute value of the dominant coefficient times the product of conjugates, the absolute value of conjugates which are outside the closed unit disk. There is the usual height of f, which is the maximum of the absolute value of the coefficients, and the Euclidean norm of f with the squares and the square root of the sum of squares of the moduli. There is a subnorm on the unit disk, so that the sup actually on the unit circle of the moduli of f of z. Okay, and there is also the length, the sum of the moduli of the coefficients, and there is another one which is the norm of f, which is used for factorization algorithms, which was developed by Bombieri and co-workers, which is the Bombieri's norm of f, which is within brackets the square root of the sum of the absolute value of the coefficient divided by the binomial coefficient. And it's easy, so this PDF will be on the website, so you can very easily check by yourself these inequalities between the height, the Euclidean norm, the length, and the Malher measure. It's a bit more complicated with the norm of Bombieri of the minimal polynomial of an algebraic integer. From the symmetric functions of the roots, there are inequalities, of course, a norm inequality between the moduli of the coefficients and the Malher measure like that. And we have the symmetric expression of the roots for the coefficients. So the Malher measure is less than the Bombieri's norm. So that's okay. The Bombieri's norm is always greater than 1. And so if we want to have a small Bombieri's norm for factorization properties, for not the minimal polynomial, but for general polynomial, and to study the factorization, if we want to have Malher measure greater than the Bombieri's norm, some roots should be inside and some outside the closed unit disk. So it's very it's a combinatorics of roots, which is easy to establish. So there is a theorem of Degault and Jeanvrin about you take a monic polynomial with a complex coefficients, can be integer coefficients also of degree d, decomposed into 3 integers, n1, n2, and n3. So n1 is the number of roots inside closed disk centered at 0 and of radius alpha less than 1. So n2 is the number of roots outside a closed disk with a radius greater than 1. And if n1, n2, n3, the degree alpha and beta satisfy this inequality, then, and this theorem is not at all obvious, so I have no time to prove it, but it is in the paper of Degault and Jeanvrin, then the Malher measure is greater than the Bombieri's norm. So we have a certain connection between the geometry of the roots and the type of factorization, because the Bombieri's norm is involved in the factorization algorithm, as they have shown in several variables also. So the Malher measure, as I wrote that, is coming very easily, and it's very classical in the courses of analysis to establish these formulas. That's the exponential of the sum of the integral from 0 to 2 pi of the log of the absolute value of f, and you integrate on the unit circle. Okay. So the Malher measure is defined for polynomials with complex coefficients. For minimal coefficients, it has really a meaning of the size of an algebraic number. So, and in the terminology, the logarithmic Malher measure is thus the log of the Malher measure of alpha. You take the Malher measure of the minimal polynomial of alpha, and take the log and obtain the logarithmic Malher measure. So the Malher measure of an algebraic number alpha is the Malher measure of its minimal polynomial, so it's uniquely defined. And therefore, we are interested by these topics to understand the minoration of of algebraic numbers in general when you take the whole class of algebraic numbers in the complex plane. So for 0, it's 1. For roots of cyclotomic polynomials, it will be 1. And when you remove these two types, these two cases, then you have a true problem of minoration in the values of the Malin measure there. So the Malin measure is always, by the very definition of that, always greater than the modulus of the dominant coefficient. And the problem of minoration of the Malin measure in the problem of Lemmer concerns algebraic numbers which have a dominant coefficient equal to plus 1, that is to say algebraic integers. So we will restrict the problem of minoration to sub-collections of algebraic integers. And we will see that in a moment. So what are the properties of the Malin measure? So if you have a polynomial which has a certain factorization, like that, so the multiplicities P1 can be equal to P2 and so on. So it's included in the writing. So then the Malin measure is the product of the Malin measures. So it's multiplicative, and therefore the Malin measure of a product of algebraic integers or algebraic numbers is a product of Malin measures of algebraic numbers, integers numbers. It's a fact, it's easy exercise that if you take the reciprocal polynomial of P, so you invert the vector coefficient from the left to the right in the writing of the polynomial, and you call it P star of x, then the Malin measure of the reciprocal polynomial is the Malin measure of P. That's the same. So you invert by this operation Z gives 1 over Z. By this transformation, you invert the collections of roots outside the closed unit disk, inside the closed unit disk, and the Malin measure can be calculated and computed from all the zeros inside or all the zeros outside of the polynomial P. So in particular, we have the Malin measure of alpha is the Malin measure of plus or minus alpha or inverse of alpha. There is a link with roots of unity by this formula. For any norm you take on the space of polynomials like that, if you call PQ instead of the roots, you take the powers of the roots like that. Then you have a decomposition of this product like that, and at the limit, when Q tends to infinity, you recover the Malin measure. So it's a way to compute. So some people have used that to allow a numerical approach of the Malin measure of some very difficult polynomials. The fact to elevate, to give a certain power to the roots, alpha j of a polynomial, goes back to a mathematician called Peirce, American mathematician before Lemmer in the 20s. And there are Peirce numbers. I will come back to that. So for alpha, any root of unity, as I said, so alpha is a root of a cyclotomic polynomial. The Malin measure is 1. And we have the very famous theorem of Kronecker, which says that if you assume that alpha is an algebraic integer, then the Malin measure is 1 if and only if alpha is a root of unity, or alpha equals 0. So we use the norm inequality, and that is then so in a few lines, it's possible to show that the only possibilities are roots of unity by establishing the fact that the powers of the roots constitute finite sets and necessary as overlaps. That gives that give the roots of unity, the equations. So now I will go to a very famous collections of algebraic integers which were studied initially by Vijayaraghavan, Salem, and then Piso, and the French locomotive. And so Charles Piso was professor at the University of Bordeaux, and he has started a collaboration with Dufresnoy in analytic number theory to associate Piso numbers to so-called Piso-Vijayaraghavan numbers to meromorphic functions, and they have studied collections of Piso numbers. So, and he had a lot of students over 15, 20 years, and Marie-Josée Bertin in France is the last student of Piso. And with his book about Piso and Salem numbers, that's a testimony of that. So a Piso number is an algebraic integer which is real, greater than 1, and all its Galois conjugates are in the open unit disk. So Piso numbers play a very important role in questions of tilings, of harmonic analysis, of spectral synthesis by the works of Lübmayer and so on. So here, because by the very definition, you see that there is no conjugate outside the closed unit disk, and therefore the Mahler measure of a Piso number is a Piso number itself. Okay. So the problem of the minoration of the Mahler measure on this subcategory of algebraic integers is very simple. Does there exist a smallest Piso number? So we will see that Siegel has shown that it is true. So there is a smallest one. So another category is the Salem numbers. So Salem numbers were introduced in the 40s, 1940 by Raphael Salem. And the definition is this one. Beta, so it's an algebraic integer greater than 1. All the conjugates in modulus less than 1 with at least one conjugate on the unit circle. So when you have this definition, you can show that all the conjugates are on the unit circle except one, which is the inverse of beta. And the minimal polynomial of a Salem number is reciprocal. Okay. So beta and 1 over beta are conjugated with pairs of complex conjugated roots of 1, of modulus 1. So, and a Perron number, it's a very important collection of real algebraic integers. A Perron number beta is an algebraic integer for which so either beta equal 1 is a Perron number, or all the conjugates of beta, all the other roots of the minimal polynomial of beta in modulus are strictly less than beta. If beta, when beta is strictly greater than 1. So P Perron is the set of Perron numbers, and it's a proof by William Parry. So William Parry was in the UK somebody very famous in number theory and dynamics. So he has launched many activities, and he had many students. Mark Polycott in the scientific committee, Kittner wanted to come today, so he's not here. He will not be welcome. So William Parry has shown that the set of Perron numbers is dense in the half-line 1 plus infinity. And there is a traditional notation that S denotes the set of Piso numbers, T the set of Salem numbers. Okay, and so now what about Mahler measures of algebraic numbers? So a priori, Mahler measures are just real quantities, okay, greater than 1, eventually 1, but greater than 1. And the set of Mahler measures is a subset of the half-line 1 plus infinity. And by topological dynamics, so in the 80s, Adler and Marcus, in the memoir of the AMS, have shown that for every algebraic number alpha, the Mahler measure is a Perron number. That is to say, a Mahler measure of an algebraic number is always the root of integer polynomial with dominant coefficient equal 1, not necessarily reciprocal, that's a theorem of Boyle also, but which has Galois conjugates, which are in modulus less than m of alpha. Okay, so Mallet measure has Galois conjugates. What is the degree of the Mallet measure as Perron number? It's extremely difficult problem, and the Mallet measure m of alpha eventually may arise from several algebraic numbers, alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3. That's called the inverse problem. So for the conjecture of Flemmer, we are bound to understand the Mallet measure and also to think about the origin of the value of the Mallet measure as Perron number and all the algebraic numbers alpha for which the Mallet measure is this value. So Adler and Marcus use topological theorems of topological entropy and equivalence of dynamical systems, topological dynamical systems, and the theory of Perron-Frobenius. So what is the theory of Perron-Frobenius? So if you don't know it, that's addressed to integer square matrices, and for which you suppose that a certain power of the matrix has only strictly positive entries. And then the theorem of Perron-Frobenius says that there is a unique dominant eigenvalue, which is real, which is an algebraic integer, and dominant, strictly dominant, that is to say a Perron number with the root of the characteristic polynomial of this matrix. Okay, so we have inclusions. So the set of any Piso number is a Perron number. Any Salem number is a Perron number by the very definition. And by the theorem of Adler and Marcus, any Mallet measure of any algebraic number is a Perron number. And in general, by multiplicativity, we have, as we have seen for the Mallet measure, we have another set, which is the Mallet measures of any integer polynomials. That's also products of Perron numbers, and therefore, that's Perron numbers also. So the last two inclusions are strict. That's a result of Arturas Dubiskas in 2004, and Boyd also gave an example. For instance, so I've quoted it. So the proof of that is not that easy. The Perron number, which has this trinomial as minimal polynomial, is not a Mallet measure. So the set of Perron numbers is not for the set of Mallet measures, and was studied as such for problems of minoration, for instance by Arturas Dubiskas. So if beta is a Perron number, so this theorem says that there exists an integer that n beta is a Mallet measure. So what is n? It's not really under control. So the proof is here. It's just a decomposition, actually, of the coefficients. We can see that together. So I will prove it slowly. So assume that beta has minimal polynomial p of degree d with a leading coefficient b, and with naive height h of beta. So h of beta is the maximum of the moduli of the coefficients. Let beta stars the maximal modulus of all the roots of p different from beta. So beta is a pair of numbers, so beta star is less than beta. And there exist many pairs of prime numbers, Q, different of T, for which beta star and beta have just in between the rational number Q divided by TB. So now we consider a pair QT such that Q is greater than the naive height of beta. And then we claim that n beta is a Malher measure of TB beta divided by Q. Okay, so we have found n like that. So n is given by Q power d minus 1 TB. So from the original polynomial P, TB beta divided by Q is the root of this new polynomial, of course. And the polynomial, so when you remove the denominators, the polynomial TD BD minus 1 P of the variable QX divided by TB has integer coefficients. And its two extreme coefficients are QD and TD BD minus 1 P of 0. These two integers are relatively prime. And therefore, this polynomial is an integer irreducible polynomial. So all its roots by construction except TB beta divided by Q lie in the unit circle. And the Malher measure, as we said, is equal by decomposition to n beta. So we have a Malher measure at the end. So we start from beta and a minimal polynomial. And what we gain is for some n explicitly constructed, n beta is a Malher measure. So that's a short proof of Dubiscus. So for the notation that I said, P star equal P, this means a reciprocal polynomial. So the vector coefficient can be read from the left to the right or to the right from the right to the left. That's identical vector coefficient. The minimal polynomial of a Salem number is monic and reciprocal. And by convention, so in general, in this problem of Lemmer, we use the convention of Chris-Smith to say that a Salem polynomial denotes the product of cyclotomic polynomials, whatever they are, by the minimal polynomial of a Salem number. So it's not necessarily reducible. It's extremely convenient in many problems. And in the dynamics, it comes also in the decomposition of the dynamics. We will see that. The minimal polynomial of a Piso number is non-reciprocal, necessarily. A Piso polynomial is a minimal polynomial of a Piso number. And a Perron polynomial is a minimal polynomial of a Perron number. So now there is an open question, still under investigations by many people. So now probably by the dynamics also, about the explicit algebraicity of the Malher measure, as I said. So for any algebraic number alpha, what is a minimal polynomial of the Malher measure? We know that it is a Perron number. So there exists a polynomial like that. We don't know the degree, we don't know the coefficient, but it exists. Okay, that's a result of the Perron-Frobenius approach. What are the relations between n, the degree of alpha, the coefficient, and the coefficient of the minimal polynomial of alpha? It's a very general problem, and there is no general solution today. So if alpha is a Piso number or a Salem number, as I said, by definition, the Malher measure of alpha is equal to alpha, and n equal d, and the coefficient vector of G is exactly the coefficient vector of the minimal polynomial. So now we are bound, so I mentioned that 2 minutes ago, we are bound to the inverse problem for Malher measures. So you take a Perron number, which is the Malher measure of a certain algebraic number alpha, And does there exist a method to find alpha and to find all the alphas, the antecedents, the predecessors, alpha I, such that m of alpha I is equal to this beta, to this fixed beta, to this fixed Perron number. So there is an effective method found by Dickson and Dubiskas, but effective but not complete. So, and if yes, how many finitely many predecessors? So alpha 1, alpha S. Okay. So there is a PhD thesis by Stens 6 years ago, giving partial answers to this problem. So from the work of Adler and Marcus in topological dynamics, there are several questions. The first one is the dominant root of this trinomial Zm minus Z minus 1 a Mallet measure for every m greater than 3. Still not solved. The second question, if alpha is reciprocal, then the Mallet measure of alpha is reciprocal or not? So that's a natural question. So the answer to Q1 is no. And the answer to Q2 by Boyd also is no. There are infinitely many reciprocal alpha with M alpha non-reciprocal. So the inverse problem was tackled by Stens for Mallet measures in his PhD and a paper after that, with Mahler sets defining studying sub-collections of algebraic integers at the same time in the complex plane in order to minimize globally finite set by finite set the Mallet measure. So it's an approach of the conjecture of Flemmer. It does not solve it. What are the limit problems now on the derived sets? So the derived sets are the adherence. And once you remove all the isolated values, so that's sets of limit points of non-stationary sequences of the set, the derived set of a set. What are the respective sets of limit accumulation points of set of Mallet measures? It's a very rich domain of mathematics with multivariate Mallet measures. It's linked to very deep questions of representation of zeta functions, L functions, and in arithmetic geometry. And I will come back to that. What are the respective sets of limit accumulation points of the set of M of alpha when alpha is an algebraic number? And in particular for Salem numbers. What are the limit points of Salem numbers? We don't know yet. What is the topology of the set of Salem numbers? Okay. So a theorem of Salem following a conjecture of Vijayaraghavan in the 40s. So Salem proved in 44 in his paper, in very famous paper in 44, that the set of Piso numbers is closed in 1 plus infinity and for the usual topology. Okay? So the adherence of S is S. And Siegel has proved, so that the problem of minoration and the problem of conjecture of Flemmer was solved for the set of Piso numbers. So Siegel has proved that the smallest Piso number is 1.3247, the real root of the trinomial x3 minus x minus 1. So we know that there is no Piso number below between 1 and 1.3247. So there are two conjectures of Boyd still valid today. So Boyd is a Canadian mathematician, very active. He received a prize some years ago in the his enumerations is really inspired by the problems and gives very interesting examples of, or counterexamples. So the first conjecture of Boyd says that the set of Piso numbers union the set of Salem numbers is closed for the usual topology of the half line 1 plus infinity. So the second conjecture of Boyd says that the first derived set of the set of Salem numbers T satisfies, well, it is equal to the set of Piso numbers. So what does it mean? That once you have removed all the isolated limit points, you obtain all the Piso numbers as limits, all. So is the one the adherence of the set of Mallet measures? So the conjecture of Lemmer is that. So the conjecture of Lemmer says that it's no. There exists a universal constant so that the Mallet measure is always bounded from below by 1 plus C. C is this universal constant strictly positive for any algebraic number. So the Mallet measure. So we have seen that the Mallet measure is always greater than the absolute value of the dominant coefficient. So for algebraic integer, it's relevant on this subcategory, which is not a root of unity. Okay, and okay. So there is no. There are pair one numbers in this interval 1, 1 plus C, but never Mallet measure. That's the conjecture of Lemmer. The conjecture of Lemmer that this universal constant exists. The statement. Okay. So by the dynamic, it's possible to tackle this problem. So I will go back to that in the second and third and the last course next week. That's very strange to observe that there is a way of attacking this problem of minoration. It's apparently a problem which belongs to number theory. And actually, the dynamics and the dynamical zeta functions have a lot to say on that. And so the conjecture of Lemmer started in 1933. So I have another PDF after to show the origin of that. Started by the problem of Lemmer. So Lemmer was investigated in 1933 in his very famous paper. He was interested in producing very big prime numbers using polynomials of very small Mallet measures. So we have evoked the problem of convergence towards the Mallet measure. So the idea was to take reciprocal polynomials having a very small Mallet measure, and in the decomposition of the norm of some algebraic function, so in linear recurrences, sequences of linear sequences of Pierce numbers. So I will come back to that. It's possible to find very big prime numbers explicitly. So that's an exhaustive process from a polynomial having a very small Mallet measure to produce very big prime numbers. So if we know today how to produce explicitly polynomials having a very small Mallet measure, it's possible to go back to the techniques developed by Lemmer in his paper to produce again very, very big prime numbers. So as you know, prime numbers are listed on the internet and they are referred, and the more recent one. And the biggest one are used for securing transmission by some, I think that the biggest prime numbers are patented to allow security for transmission for the US Army and so on. So if mathematically we can control that by the problem of Lemmer finding polynomials very small Mallet measure, it would be a way of taking and understanding better the relationship between very small Mallet measures, the structure of such polynomials, and also the very big prime numbers which can be produced. So on the other PDF after, I will show an overview of that. I would like to continue for the problem of the minoration. So a very important theorem going back to the PhD thesis of Chris Smith in 71, 72. very important theorem is this one. You take an so the theorem of Chris-Smith is this one. So you take an integer polynomial which has not a constant coefficient 0. You assume it is not reciprocal, and then you can prove, and we will in the next slides I will give you the proof of that. It's important. The Malher measure of f is greater than the smallest Piso number. It's impossible for a non-reciprocal polynomial to have a Malher measure arbitrarily close to 1. So if we go back to the paper of Lemmer in 1933, all the examples that Lemmer gives at the end of his paper are reciprocal algebraic integers, of course. So he didn't know about this theorem of Chris-Smith, but he has found explicitly by hand, there was no computer at that time, Salem polynomials actually which have a very small Malher measure. So I will show you after also a list of polynomials with very small Malher measures by techniques which were obtained recently by Mossinghoff, George, and so on, where they are in the list. And it's, what Lemmer did at that time was extremely good. So behind the conjecture of Lemmer, there is a fundamental question, as I wrote, about the minoration of the Malher measure, M alpha, of a non-zero algebraic integer alpha, which is not a root of unity. And with this theorem of Chris-Smith, we know that we have just to investigate reciprocal algebraic integers, and it will be sufficient, because the question is closed, the conjecture of Lemmer is closed for this. For the category, the subcollection of non-reciprocal algebraic integers. So what are the relationship between reciprocity and minoration? So there is a nice theorem by Cassels in 1966. If you take an integer polynomial where the roots satisfy all of them this inequality in modulus, so the modulus of alpha j less than 1 plus log of the smallest Salem Piso number, theta divided by the degree, all of them, then f is reciprocal or anti-reciprocal. So when there is a minus, it's called anti-reciprocal. So when all the roots are very close to the unit circle, this means that, okay, we are sure that oh, okay, that's efficient. Sorry, I cancel what I said. So the proof is to use Smith theorem. It's a consequence of Chris-Smith theorem now, and the Malher measure is just less than the power d of this upper bound, and then it gives theta. That's all. It's very simple. Okay. So now I would like to give a proof of the theorem of Chris-Smith. So it uses Blaschke products, Blaschke functions, and the Fourier expansions of them. So that's playing with the first coefficients only. So if you consider alpha a complex number, whatever it is, you can write this analytic function, it's a rational function, b alpha of z, which is z minus alpha divided by 1 minus alpha bar z. And if alpha in modulus is less than 1, then this Blaschke function is holomorphic on an open disk containing the closed unit disk, with a property that in modulus it is 1 when z runs over the unit circle, necessarily. Well. So the proposition, the first proposition, is that when you take, so it will be general for the following. If alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha r, now are R tuple of complex numbers of modulus strictly less than 1. So BZ, that's the product of the Blaschke function, like that, individually, so each of them. Can be written C0 plus C1z plus C2z2 and so on. And so this function is called the Blaschke function associated to the R tuple. And then we have 1 equals the sum of the squares of the moduli of the coefficients. So it will be used as an ingredient in the following. So it is deduced from this relation. Where do you develop? Actually, it's a Fourier series, and the property is that B in modulus is equal to 1 on the unit circle. And so now you consider F, a real polynomial without zeros on the unit circle, which does not vanish at 0. And B and B hat, the Blaschke functions associated with the zeros of F and F star inside the open unit disk. So you associate these two analytic functions to the subcollection of zeros inside the open unit disk. And then what happens, the ratio B of F has no zeros. Its pole being the root of F outside the closed unit disk, and okay. Yeah, the poles are the roots of F outside the closed unit disk, and the one of alpha bar when alpha runs over the roots of F in the open unit disk. So we do the same for B hat divided by the reciprocal of F, so that we have this identity. So now we consider the Taylor coefficients of B hat, and F divided by F star at the origin. And we assume that the constant and dominant coefficients of F are 1. And so we have that the modulus of C0, so C0, C1, C2 are the coefficients. So the modulus of C0 is 1 divided by the Marley measure. The modulus of D0 is also equal to 1 over the Marley measure, and A0 equal to plus or minus 1. So now if F divided by F star is not constant, so the assumption in the theorem of Chris-Smith is that the minimal polynomial is not reciprocal, so it's not a constant. So there exists a smallest integer k such that ak is different of 0 with the property. So we decompose the previous identity b divided by f b hat equal b hat divided by f star, and ck is equal to a0 dk plus ak d0. And therefore, we have the fact that ck minus plus or minus dk is equal ak d0 different of 0. And therefore, from that, we deduce that the modulus of dk is greater than the absolute value of ak, c divided by 2. Or the modulus of ck is greater than the modulus of ak, say, divided by 2. And therefore, by the preceding propositions applied to B or B star, we have 1. So we consider only, so it was 1 equal to the infinite sum of the coefficients. So we truncate just to the first coefficients. We have 1 greater than C2, C square, plus the square of the moduli of AK divided by 4, C square. And thus, the Mahler measure is greater than this value. So that's not bad. We have a minor round, we have a lower bound, but we can do better than that. So assume now that f is monic, integer, irreducible, non-reciprocal, with taking value 1 at z equals 0. So f has no roots on the unit circle. So if not, f star would also have the same root on the unit circle and everywhere, but it would mean that f equals f star, and that is excluded. It's excluded. And so then AK is greater than 1 in modulus, and then we have access to this minor round of the Malher measure. That's that's not very difficult using the coefficient of the Blacker function to solve that. So now Chris Smith has extended this type of narration to refine it using some matrices. So I just sketched what he did with quadratic forms. So the sharpening of this lower bound is a consequence of the following lemma. So you can find that in his paper of 71. For all real numbers x0, x1, xn, the inequality, the following inequality holds. Okay, you have the Euclidean norm to the right, and left you have the coefficients you have in the Taylor coefficients in the expansion we have seen of the Blasker function. But it's very general. And when you take this matrix, the matrices 1 plus A and 1 minus A are symmetric, positive, and definite. And in particular, the following equalities holds like that. So 1 is greater than c squared plus modulus of Cn. So C2n is the second line lies in this interval, 1 minus C0 square minus Cn square divided on 1 minus C0, and with the other sign on the left. For B hat divided by f square, we have 1 greater than d square plus modulus of dn, and d2n is belong to this interval. So the proof of that is a Parseval equality, and okay, and Cauchy-Schwarz, and a certain determinant which is strictly positive. So technical stuff. And now we would like to apply that to the problem to the statement of the theorem of Chris Smith. So now we would like to refine the minor round of the Malher measure, and so therefore we had the max of Cn and Dn in modulus greater than the modulus of C divided by 2. And from the previous inequality, we have 1 minus C squared greater than C divided by 2, which has an implication that the Malher measure should satisfy this inequality. And therefore, we have a Malher measure greater than 1.28. That's still better, but we are not yet at the smallest Piso number, which is 132.47 and so on. So we continue this approach by the matrices. So now, without loss of generality, we can assume that the Malher measure is less than 1.33333, 4 divided by 3, and the value of the Blaschke function is greater than 0 at the origin, with a hat of Blaschke function. So now we expand f divided by f star. So it's a certain number of coefficients are 0, except when the index is k and l, and we can write that like that, with c equals c0 d0, which is the inverse of the Malher measure of f. AK the in coefficient ak different of 0, coefficient al different of 0, and we have cg equal dg for g between 0 and k, and the other relations between the coefficients ck of b of f and dk of dg of b hat divided by f star. So what we deduce is the fact that AK should be of modulus 1, AL also, and the sum CK plus DK should be equal to C. So indeed, if we have AK in modulus greater than 2, since the max of CK and DK in modulus is greater than is C or above, and in the lemma we would have 1 minus C squared greater than C, that is to say, the Mahler measure should satisfy this inequality. So there is a contradiction because this inequality corresponds to the golden mean, 1.618, okay? That's x squared minus x minus 1. And we have assumed the Mahler measure strictly less than 4 divided by 3. So that's not possible. So if AL in modulus is greater than 2, since we have the maximum of CL, DL, and DL minus K in modulus greater than 2C divided by 3. So in the lemma, we refer to the inequality of the lemma, we would have 1 minus C squared, at least 2C divided by 3 or more. And so there is a contradiction also because the Mahler measure is less than 4 divided by 3. And in the other case, which would be possible, the sum of CK and DK in modulus is greater than C. So if we assume a strict inequality, then we would have C equals CK minus DK in modulus, or C equal DK minus CK in modulus, and the max of CK and DK in modulus greater than C. So there is also contradiction. So necessarily we have the result at the top. So AK in AL and equal 1, and CK plus DK equal C. So now there are two cases. So I have just sketched in the next slide the proof of the case where 2K is less than L. And so when 2K is greater than L, that's similar, and I left it as an exercise. So we need the inequalities which were in there when we have the index is 2n. We played with Cn. Now we will play with C2n and Dn and D2n. And so in this case, we can assume 2k strictly greater than less than L, less than L. Because if we have equality, if 2k is equal L, it would be this coefficient would be equal to plus or minus 1, and by interchanging f and f star, we will lead to okay, so yes, okay. So we would like to apply the inequalities of the lemma to the index 2k and for C, for the Taylor coefficients of the B over F, and for hat of B divided by F star. And when we do that and we add both, then we are bound to study the variations of this function. And we have seen on the first line that AK equal to 1 in modulus. We have C equals CK plus DK in modulus. And we deduce that the modulus of DK is less than the maximal of this function. I just indicated it at the value CK and DK in modulus. So this value. So we are bound to the variation of this value, and the maxima and the minima. So this is the last slide of the proof. So the equation of the smallest Pearson number is here. I would like to finish up the description of the proof there. We have access to the inequalities from above. 1 minus c square greater than dk in modulus, greater than c minus ck in modulus, and greater than c plus c2, c square minus 1. So if I, the interval, so if we denote by I the interval c plus c square minus 1 minus 1 minus c square, then we would have c square plus c minus 1 less than the maximum of this function. So, but this function takes its maximum at x equal 1/2 of 1 plus c, okay? And with 1 plus c divided by 2 greater than 1 minus c square. And it's increasing on I, and then we have just a maximum at the extremity. So we have this inequality, which by simplification goes to the root of this polynomial, which correspond actually to the result of Siegel, which is the smallest Pearson number. Okay. So the Mahler measure in necessary relay. So this zone is totally excluded. When we have this inequality which should be satisfied, necessarily the Mahler measure is greater than the root of this polynomial, okay, which is the smallest Pearson number. So when an integer polynomial is non-reciprocal, its Mahler measure is at least the smallest Pearson number, the dominant root of this trinomial, which is actually an algebraic integer, which is the smallest Pearson number. So I am sketchy that, but you can reconstitute from the paper of Chris Smith and the notes, the PDF, the complete proof for yourself. And the second case of the proof is similar, so that's, there is nothing hidden. So there are also deep theorems about the minoration of the Mahler measure. The first one is a remarkable theorem of Dobrowolski, which does not use the dynamics, no zeta functions, but techniques of Diophantine approximations and periodic points by Dobrowolski in 1979. So the Mahler measure of any reciprocal algebraic integer. So we're in the domain of investigation of the conjecture of Flemmer of degree D. The Mahler measure is strictly greater than 1 plus something. The something was initially in the original paper of Dobrowolski 1 divided by 1,200. So André Schinzel, 20 years after, has reinvestigated this theorem of Dobrowolski to show that it's possible, almost possible, to put 1 instead of 1 minus epsilon, instead of 1 divided by the constant 1 divided by 1,200. So he wrote 1 minus epsilon, and the term after is the power 3 of the log of the degree, the true degree, divided by the log d. But when you write 1 minus epsilon, it becomes non-effective. So we know that when the degree is very, very large, then the 1 minus epsilon is almost epsilon and can be almost replaced by 1. So the 1 minus epsilon is due to Schinzel. I didn't write that, but it's like that. And Voutier, by reconsidering also p-adic points, and he did a Diophantine approximation approach of that differently, obtained 1 divided by 4 for any degree 2 and above. So it's an improvement of the constant. And you see that when your degree tends to infinity, what happens when alpha in modulus tends to 1, the minorant is 1. And it does not solve at all. These two inequalities do not solve at all the conjecture of Flemmer. The minorant are not relevant enough. So Garza, 10 years ago, obtained generalization for algebraic integers by. So there is a very simple elementary proof of that by Eun in the International Journal of Number Theory. So I will sketch it after. That's in French, sorry. So if you take an integer polynomial of an algebraic number alpha 1, you take the absolute height of alpha, which is defined there. So you take the power of the Mahler measure to 1 divided by the degree, and you consider small r the number of real roots of this polynomial, and you put big R equal the ratio, the prorata of real roots divided by the degree, and then this height, so it's correlated to the Mahler measure, it's a certain power of the Mahler measure, the power is 1 divided by d, is greater than this expression. Okay. So okay. So it's a minorant. So the default of Garza's lower bound is yes. There is a proof, a very easy proof where you. Sorry. Whoops. Okay, what time? Yes, okay. So the Dobrowolski inequality does not solve the conjecture of Flemmer. The lower bound of Voutier does not solve the conjecture of Flemmer. They do not take into account the fact that it could be a gap in the values of the Mahler measure. And Garza's bounds are the same when the degree tends to infinity. So it can be observed like that in the minorant. If you take, for instance, R fixed and D tending to infinity, what do you have? You have a big R tends to 0, okay? And the minorant is 1. Okay, so I have detailed that after. So if the minorant is 1, it's unvaluable. It's not valuable for saying anything on the problem of the minoration when alpha in modulus tends to 1 in the attack of the problem of Flemmer. So I think I have time to sketch actually the line of ingredients included there. So the absolute height is used in algebraic number theory. So the absolute light is correlated to the Mahler measure, like that. D is the degree. So first we show that by the properties of the Mahler measure, the first line is obvious. Then we consider a function on the field of complex numbers with a between 0 and 1/2, like that. And it's easy to show that the maximum of the function z to f of z divided by the maximum of 1 and absolute value of z is 2 to the power a. So, okay. On C in the complex plane, so that this maximum is called MC, and when you consider this function on the real line only, the restriction of this function to the real line, you obtain another maximum, which is MR, which is this one. That's another function of A. Okay, so for any A between 0 and 1/2, it's general. So we have a maximum MC, MR. So what do we do with that? So now we assume that alpha is an algebraic integer. That is to say C equal 1. So C is the dominant coefficient of the polynomial. Okay. We show that the product of the values of f at alpha is a kind of resultant, is equal to the product of the modulus of p at 0, that's the constant coefficient, to the power 1/2 divided minus a, times the value of p at 1 in modulus, the value of p at -1, and both to the power a, and greater than 1, and the absolute height greater than mc to the power r-1 divided by the maximum on the real line of the function divided by the maximum of the real line to the power r. So R is a prorata of real roots of the polynomial. And then it's easy to deduce that with A equal, so we have to have A between 0 and 1/2 with this value, and we deduce the result. So the result 1 is this one. Okay. That's just, it comes very naturally from the two maxima. So now, if we assume that alpha is an algebraic number which is not an algebraic integer, so we have a coefficient, that is to say the dominant coefficient of the minimum polynomial is at least 2, 3, and so on. And so they can be, the previous result can be extended as follows. We consider the number field generated by alpha over Q. And so V is a place, normalized corresponding absolute value is denoted by 0.2 bars V over K. So the local degree is denoted by dV. Alpha V is the image of alpha by the Q automorphism of the Galois theory, of the algebraic closure, and which satisfies this identity. So if gamma denotes an arbitrary element of K, so we have a normalized height, and we have the product formula of all the places. So that's classical. So if we choose gamma, we have this inequality. So 1 less than this product with the local degrees. Over the Archimedean places, over the non-Archimedean places. Okay, there are two products. And by using the fact that the function j of x, which is written here, satisfies, is invariant by inversion, we deduce actually that 1 is less than, so that's the two maxima times the product of the absolute height of alpha, the absolute height of alpha minus 1, and square root. And then we will deduce the inequalities. That's just an extension. Huh? Okay. So we have the two cases. First, we have proved the theorem of Garza for algebraic integers, C equal 1, so the dominant coefficient. The second case is for algebraic numbers, which are not algebraic integers. And now shows that the function introduced above is optimal in the family. So to obtain the best minoration in one, so that is to say the bond of Garza is optimal for this family. So this family is fairly natural to introduce, but it has to be seen with these coefficients. And for R equal 1, so the lower bound given by 1 is optimal. What is the value? That's the golden mean. That's 1.61 and so on. So it's R equal 1, that's 2, that's 1 plus square root of 5 divided by 2. Okay, so my comment, so the natural comments. These bonds, Dobrovolsky, the very famous Dobrovolsky inequality, Voutiers, or Garza do not take into account the conjecture of Lemmer by the fact that when d tends to infinity, the limit minorants are equal to 1. They do not solve anything. So we need to add extra information to this type of study, in particular to propose by the dynamics and by the dynamical zeta function to propose another Dobrovolsky's inequality or Dobrovolsky type to try to take into account the fact that to obtain limit minorants strictly greater than 1. So it's very important. What is the conjecture of Shinza-Zassenhaus now? So it's related to the maximal value of the moduli of the conjugates of an algebraic number. So there exists a constant, a universal constant, such that for any algebraic integer, so degree of alpha is d, not being a fruit of unity, and the house is the maximum of the moduli of the conjugate. So there exists a universal constant such that the house of alpha for any alpha satisfies this inequality, strict inequality 1 plus this constant divided by the degree. So André Schinzel, in the study of the conjecture of Lemmer, proposed that. It was fairly natural. And actually the dynamics, in general, is a continuation of his ideas, because we are interested in the Reni-Parry dynamics of the house of any algebraic integer, which is reciprocal, to investigate the problem of Lemmer by the dynamics. So in the original paper of Shinza-Zassenhaus, of Shinza and Zassenhaus in 65, if alpha has 2s conjugates, not real, then we have this bond. This bond is very bad, but it was the first result. And so much more recently, there is a theorem by Zubiskas showing that this house of alpha, so with the same assumptions on alpha, is strictly greater than 1 plus something which is 64 divided by pi square, and 1 over d, the degree, and exactly the same power 3 of log d of log d that you can find in the inequality of Dobrovolsky. That's very strange, but it occurs the same way. And it's, well, epsilon, that's to say that the degree should be fairly large. It's not effective result. So the Mahler measure, the problem of the minoration of Mahler measure, as found in higher dimension and in the algebraic varieties, it's a natural rephrasing or continuation by the theory of heights of rational points. And so the problem of the minoration of the Mahler measure is the problem of the minoration of the heights in general for abelian varieties, for n-dimensional tori, and so on, for K3 surfaces. And so in the manuscript I deposited on the archive last September, there is an overview of the problem in higher dimension, in 60 pages or something like that, not only for Abelian varieties and dimensional tori, in many in topology and in various aspects of geometry, Coxeter groups. The problem of Lemmer has very deep rephrasing and rewriting in several areas of mathematics, and it's correlated very deeply to many problems. So I try to separate out and different problems and to investigate that explicitly to understand the structure of the polynomials involved when they have a very small Mallet measure, to which topological situations they are associated, geometrical situations, and so it's in complex analysis. Okay. The theory of heights, what it is. So I suspect that you had a course on that. So what is the height of a rational number before going to algebraic numbers? So if you take alpha equal P over Q, with the greatest common divisor of P and Q equal 1, so it's a root of a minimal polynomial, and we define its height by the maximum of P and Q in modulus. So it measures the size of alpha. So that's not the absolute height. That's the naive height. Okay, the calligraphy is different, and the number of information we need to write down alpha, number of digits, is included in this value. So we have by a theorem of by a general theorem the collection of alpha for which the height is less than c is finite for any real number c. And when we go outside the field of rational numbers, we encounter the same type of theorems. The height functions possesses decomposition into local factors. So we can go to by this way to algebraic numbers in general. For each prime number, we can associate a valuation, okay, like that, a normalized valuation, which has properties that you know, multiplicativity and subadditivity. And two valuations are said equivalent if there is a real number, such that V alpha is equal V alpha to a certain power. And by a theorem of Ostrowski, we know all the valuations on Q and the classes of valuations. Okay. And now, when we go to local heights of alpha, so the calligraphy is like that. So h infinity of alpha is the max of 1 and alpha infinite valuation, infinite place. We have this writing on Q star, and with a prime factor decomposition of the numerator, it's fully classical. So now we would like to generalize this notion of local height to algebraic numbers. We have a minimal polynomial. We have an absolute height as it is written here. So we have seen it is correlated to the Mallet measure. And the Weil height, h, is defined by the logarithm. So that's the logarithm of the Mallet measure divided by the degree. So it comes from the equations and local factors. So the Weil height is important to study. The minoration of the Weil height is the same, apart from the degree, the denominator, it's the same, the problem of the minoration of the logarithmic Mallet measure. So it's classical to say that the local contribution do not depend on the field extension. So I'm speaking of things which are usual for number theorists. with a product formula and the norm, which is a product of the conjugates for the over the. Okay. So the theorem is that for a number field and after of K we have this expression by decomposing the local factors. Okay, so I would like to go a bit quicker. So the properties of the Weil height now on algebraic numbers with local factors and periodic valuations and Archimedean places. So the Weil height satisfies these equations. And the reformulation of the conjecture of Lemmer in terms of the Weil height, and more generally with a canonical height of for abelian variety and so on, it's a minoration. It's a constant divided. If it is true, if there is a discontinuity of at one of the set of Malher measures of algebraic numbers. The Weil height should be greater than a certain constant, which is universal divided by the degree. When alpha is not an algebraic number and not a root of unity. So for the local factors and local information, so there is an excellent overview in the book of Michel Waldschmidt, Diophantine approximation and linear algebraic groups, transcendence properties of the exponential function in several variables. And the problem of Lemmer, and actually he has obtained a Dobrovsky type inequality with a constant which is different from Voutier using auxiliary functions. So I would like to finish up. So I would like to mention limit Malher measures in the spirit of understanding the topology. So the problem of Lemmer is concerned with what happens to Malher measures when the variable goes to 1. So this is a limit point, but there are of course other limit points. And what happens when okay, so here let's say beta tends to 1. Beta tends to another value. Beta running over the set of Malher measures. So that's a limit point. For instance, if you take the set in the half line 1 plus infinity, the set of Salem numbers, when beta runs over the set of Salem numbers, and there is a limit point. So what is a limit? What is a limit? Is it a Piso or Salem number? Is it what kind of object do we have? Algebraic object do we have? And so on. So the set of limit points of the set of Malher measures is obtained by the following useful theorem of Boyd. So it was unpartially proved by Boyd in his paper in 81, but it's generally true, and completed by Lawton in 83, which correlates Malher measures of univariate polynomials to Malher measures of multivariate polynomials. And so you have the Malher measure of by Jensen's formula in general for n variable. It's possible to define the Malher measure of a polynomial with n variables on the n-dimensional torus, okay? And also, it's possible, as we have seen, to consider the Malher measure of the polynomial deduced from this one when by a R tuple, R1, Rn, when you exchange the subscript by a superscript, which is R1, R2 is exponent, a sequence, n tuple of exponents like that. And this theorem says that the limit of the univariate Malher measures is equal to the Malher measures of this polynomial. That's extremely useful, and it has a very rich consequences on many aspects. There is a cohomological aspects by Rodriguez Villegas and Delling, and it's linked to periods, mixed motifs of period also. So, as an example to finish that, because that's simple, and I would like to stop after that. It's possible to write that the Mallet measure of the trinomial -1 plus x plus xn, when n tends to infinity, is only the Mallet measure of -1 plus x plus y, defined on the right by the Jensen's formula, and on the left, just because by large zeta function, it's possible to give a sense to any term. So in general, we have polynomials. May have polynomials. So this formula of Boyd can be extended to Laurent series also. So and give access to define this type of limit. So in this type of limit, there are values of zeta functions, there are values of L functions. There is a chomological approach of these limits by symbols. So François Bruno in Lyon is working on that. Rodriguez Villegas, Denninger, and his students, Bornhorn. And there is a try to understand for polynomials which are coming from abelian varieties, for instance, or case-free surfaces, what is the limit, and to understand the geometry corresponding to this type of limit. That's purely algebraic, but for polynomials or Laurent series who are coming from actions on some varieties, it's very interesting to understand the link between varieties and this type of theorem. So there are assumptions in the limit. So there, as you see, there is so it's not the absolute height, or it's just a max of the coefficient in there. So that's a limit by by hyperplanes, okay, and a metric aspect of the hyperplane. So for complicated polynomials, the assumptions are not satisfied, but for many examples you can find in the literature, this theorem of Boyle-Houghton works, and the max of the coefficients involved in the linear forms there. So I will show examples of that. But by the dynamic, it's possible to study this type of limit Mallet measures, so limit points of the set of Mallet measures, and to study the neighborhood of one. So we will do that with dynamical zeta functions after. And I will introduce the Reni-Parry dynamical system, the beta shift, and what people use command line enumeration systems in theoretical computer science, and in coding, and so on. But applied to problems in number theory. So thank you for your attention.